In this episode, we are going to talk about the top preserving tips for the end of the season. We'd be out in the garden again today. It's not smoky, but it's super windy. We're just having some major fall winds today. So here we are inside. Gusts. Yeah. In this episode, I said that we're going to be talking about some of the top preserving tips that Jami has, and I kind of gave it away. I had a little question here, and it was, can you guess what the top posts on Jami's site are at this time of year? So, what are they?
Well, they're all preserving. Top 3 are preserving posts.
Before we do the tips, I want to do a quick countdown of what those are. So, like, what's like the third most popular?
That would be salsa. I have a really good recipe for a thick and chunky salsa that is still safe for canning. So that's a big deal because most canning salsa recipes have to have so much liquid in it, vinegar or lemon juice or something, to help the ratio that they end up being really runny. So I found a recipe and adapted it, but it's still very safe, and it's safe for canning, but it's thicker.
And is it easy to do?
Of course.
Okay. Because homemade salsa is like so much better than anything you get in the store. It's incredible. Okay. All right. So that was the third. What's the second most popular?
The second one is how to freeze green beans in an unconventional manner. So, giveaway, I don't blanch them. And I know there are blanchers and unblanchers, and if you blanch, it's great. We didn't like the flavor and the texture of them blanched, and I just tried it unblanched, and we really liked it. So I wrote about it, and there's a lot of other people who agree with me.
Yeah, and that title cracks me up because that's kind of that figure of speech of blanching, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to blanch at these green beans. Okay, so you don't have to blanch. You can just boldly do it. So what's the number one?
The number one most popular this year by far is 3 ways to freeze corn. Yeah.
Who knew that people loved homemade corn so much?
Yeah, they must be growing it a lot, I guess. And so, yeah, different ways and what are the best and why you'd want to do the different ways. It's actually, the spoiler is I like to have all 3 ways of corn frozen in my freezer if I have some corn, because each one is good in its own.
Yeah, and you don't have to like grow the corn. I mean, you can get fresh farm stand corn. Is another way to do it. It's so good. It's so much better than commercially frozen.
Oh yeah.
So, okay, so those are what are most popular. Now we're going to look at Jami's top tips for end of season preserving.
You've got a bunch of stuff coming in from the harvest and you're not sure what to do. Some of it's not at its prime, but there's always things we can do with it. Okay, so the end of the season is just crazy time in the garden because you've got all the stuff coming in, you're trying to keep up with things, you're filling bowls, and you still have your life to live, so things can get out of control. So I have a couple of things that I always do at the end of the season that really help to spread it out and give me time to deal with it, or use up all of those last little things. When you don't have enough to make a full batch of something, there are things you can do with it. So they include a lot of things, and I'm going to share 5 of them with you today. The first is one that I love easiest because tomatoes do come in a lot at the end of the season. You bring them in, you ripen them, you've already canned a lot and you're not sure what to do. So I freeze them. So freezing tomatoes whole is just a great way to get them at their freshest. They taste still amazing, and you'll be able to do something with them later. So my favorite way is just to core them and leave them whole, because and then weigh them and before you freeze them, and then put the weight on this. So now this is 4 pounds of cored tomatoes, and they're ready to make a pizza sauce or something else that I might want to make when the weather's cooler and I have more time and I can decide when to do it. You can also freeze these whole without coring them. You can just stick them in a bag. You've got tomatoes, you don't have time, stick them in a bag, put them in the freezer, and then you can use them for recipes. Any recipe during the year that calls for canned tomatoes, you can use frozen tomatoes. You just run them under water or put them in a bowl of water and slip the skins off, and then dice them up and use them instead of a can of diced tomatoes, and you've got fresh garden tomatoes for that. So just sticking tomatoes in a bag is like my number one thing I like to do at the end of the season. Okay, and I should mention that the link to more information on how to freeze tomatoes will be in the show notes, will also be in the description, so you can check that out, as well as links to the other things I'm going to talk about. So make sure you look at the description or visit the show notes page. The second thing that I like to do to make sure we get all of the harvest that we can from our tomatoes is not a typical preserving idea, but it is a tip to get your tomatoes to last longer, which is kind of preserving. So it's how to ripen them inside. And the key is you want to go out and you want to find any tomato that has even a hint of pink or yellow. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but this looks like a green tomato, but it has a little bit of color coming in on it. That will turn for you. If it's completely green, solid green and firm, it will not turn. It doesn't matter what you do, it will not turn. So that's best to use that in a green tomato Salsa Verde or something. But if it has any kind of blush on it, this is much easier to see. You can see how much pink that has on it. You take them and you put them in a brown paper bag. And I don't wrap them separately. I just put them in a brown paper bag. I do enough that it's one layer in the bag. So I might have a number of these bags. Bring all your tomatoes that have it, even if they're the little ones and you'd like to see them ripen. Put them in the bag in a single layer and then close the bag up. You can, if you want to try to ripen them sooner, you can put like a banana or an apple in them, but you really don't need to. And you kind of want them to ripen gradually so you can use them. These are great for eating fresh all the way into December. We have had tomatoes from these bags from our garden, eating fresh tomatoes from the garden into December because we've done this. So you can put a date on it if you want, put it in a room where you can check on it every once in a while. I put a little clip on the top just to keep it closed, and you will pull them out as they ripen, and you will have fresh tomatoes, and they'll stay fresh like this and be ripening for months until they're done. But you do have to check them because a few of them might get rotten depending on what they were like when you picked them. So do check them regularly every few days, and it's a great way to get more out of your tomatoes. So the other thing out in the garden that you'll want to make sure you harvest all of as soon as your nighttime temperatures start really below 50 permanently, like they're not really going up and down, they're just staying below 50. Basil needs to be harvested. It doesn't like it. You'll see the ends of it starting to turn brown, and that's when your clue, well, right before that, is your clue that you need to harvest all the basil. So harvest all the basil, bring it in, and you can do a couple of things with it. You can dry it, stick it in a food dryer and dry it, and some people are like, why would you do that when you can go buy basil pretty cheaply in the store, dried basil? Is because once you open the container of home-dried basil, you will understand why you do it. It smells so much better than the store-bought stuff. It just smells like basil, which is amazing. So you can dry it. I also have an article on the blog about 6 different ways to freeze basil and which is the best. And the best is actually the easiest, where you just stick it in a baggie. You stick the leaves in a baggie and you break them off as you need them and use them in soups and stews. So you can do that. And then our other favorite thing to do with pesto, I gave it away, to do with basil is to make pesto. And so I have a great recipe on the blog. It's our favorite recipe, and it just happens to be cheaper than the regular pesto because it doesn't use the expensive pine nuts. But you can freeze pesto. I'm getting it all mixed up. You can freeze basil in pesto for more than a year. We've had those for more than a year and they stay fresh, especially if you use a little bit of lemon juice in it, like I mentioned in the recipe. So taking care of basil is another end of the season thing, and you can easily preserve it in a number of ways so that you don't waste it. One of my absolute favorite things to do at the end of the season in the garden is to use up the tomatoes and other vegetables that are coming in and make a delicious freezer roasted tomato sauce. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have in the freezer. It tastes heavenly. And I'm just going to show you briefly how easy it is to use up some of your end of season produce in it. But the full recipe is on anoregoncottage.com. So you want to wash your stuff and then you simply cut your tomatoes in half. You core them and that's it. So it moves really quickly because that's all you do with your tomatoes. You put a little bit of olive oil in a baking pan, and these are gonna roast in the oven at 425. So you wanna have pans that can do that. And then you just set them cut side down in the pan, and you can do it with all kinds of tomatoes. You can do it with your paste tomatoes, heirloom tomato. I like a combo of both paste and heirloom so that you're getting all that good flavor from the heirloom and the thickness from the paste. So now at the end of the season, you're gonna have tomatoes that have like stuff in them, and it's a perfectly good tomato for that, but we're told that it's probably not best to can with tomatoes like that. So it's perfect for freezing. This is a great way to use up your tomatoes if they've been frost, if they have blight or your vines have blight or have had some frost damage. You're not supposed to can with those tomatoes either, so this is a great option for that. So also, if you have peppers, this is just a great way to use up your peppers, and you do the same thing as you just core them, and you can cut them into little pieces or you can put them in there in half like that. You want to have onion, so you can either buy onion or have it, but you've got to have that for the flavor, and you just throw that in there. I love to use zucchini, so we've still got zucchini coming out our ears, and it's a great way to hide the zucchini in something that everybody loves. So when my kids were little, they would not have touched a zucchini no matter what I did to it. But when I put it in this tomato sauce and I roasted it and served it to them over spaghetti, they did not know they were eating zucchini. So it's a great way to do that. So you're gonna put this in it, and the other secret ingredient to this, besides salt and pepper and some Italian seasonings, I also like to use up some of our fresh basil, and I'll just throw that in there too, is balsamic vinegar. Okay, when your pan's full and it has everything in it, including the key balsamic vinegar, you're gonna roast it in the oven for about an hour at 425. And then I just dump it from this pan into a pot. I usually am making more than one pan at a time. I dump it into a large pot and then just use my immersion blender with it. You can use a regular blender, but you know, when you're dealing with hot stuff, sometimes it wants to shoot out when you're using it. So that's why I do the immersion blender, but a regular blender can work as well. And then you simply just put it into a mason jar and stick it in the freezer, and this is ready to go. It will last for a long time, and it's so good. I can't tell you. I mean, you can eat it with a spoon, you can eat it as soup, you can eat it as a sauce. It's just really good, and once you try it, you will be making this a lot. Then the last thing I wanted to talk is a traditional canning, but it's pickled, and canning pickles is really easy to do in a water bath canner. And I have a whole tutorial that just makes water bath canning really easy, and we will link to that as well as some pickling recipes. And the reason that I like it is because you can pickle a lot of different things. So say you have a couple of carrots, an onion, a zucchini, a pepper. You can put them all together. This one happens to be a jardinera, and I actually put a jalapeno in there because I like it spicy, and we put some green olives. And what's fun about having a mixed pickle canned like this is they just make a great salad. Just you pour this on the top of a bed of lettuce, and you have a salad. It already has a dressing, or you can make a dressing with the you can add oil to this pickle juice and shake it up and make a dressing out of it. So it's delicious that way. It's delicious just to eat on its own, on cheese plates. It's wonderful to have these, and it's a great way to use up odds and ends from the end of the garden season.
Well, that is a lot of preserving. That is going to be some good stuff. I always look forward to. By the way, because fresh produce from the garden, like fresh tomatoes, there's just a couple weeks really, if you add it all up, where you can eat garden fresh tomatoes. And so you gotta, by preserving, you can extend your enjoyment of
a couple
tomatoes.
Months.
Well, it seems to me like a couple weeks because I love them. Because then you're back to the grocery store,
yeah.
The hardened grocery store.
No.
So anyway, that's looking good. So you probably know that we have a 100-year-old farmhouse that we're working on, and we have done some major milestones. We're going to go down and take a look at what we've been doing. Okay, we have been here before, I think several times on these episodes, but I just wanted you to take a look at it's now completely done. All the tile is in. The bench was really tough. different parts were a challenge, but the bench, especially the corner here. And one of the skills I gained in doing it myself was popping tiles out that had been put in wrongly so that I could put them back in the right way. So that's definitely a skill you have to have if you're going to be doing your tile yourself. Don't be afraid to do it right. Don't be afraid to pop a bad tile out and put it in the right way. Now, the next time you see it, it really will be done, because our next step is to grout. We're going to grout all this, so that it'll be a lighter color in between all of this subway tile, and hopefully that's going to really bring it all together and make it look great.
So I'm super excited to share that the floor in the bathroom is done, and we use this really cool tile. And I have to say, any of you who have listened to the podcast or any other Simple Homemade Life episodes know that I had wished I didn't have to tile. But this floor was so easy that I could say that I'll do floors again, because with the bigger tiles, it made all the difference. It took us less than a day working together. Brian cut and I laid, and we put down the floor, and then it was only a couple hours, less than a couple hours, to grout it a few days later. So really easy, definitely worth it, because we were quoted $1,600 just for this little 60 square foot floor. So huge savings. I would do it again in a heartbeat, even though I don't like to tile.
That is all we have for this episode. But if you haven't yet, please give us a like. We would love that. And also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode, where we're going to talk about kind of the tasks and things that you need to do in the fall, kind of at the end of your garden season. Did I characterize that correctly?
We'll be taking a tour of the fall garden. By the next episode, it'll be winding down. There won't be a whole lot left to harvest, but there are still some things. So we'll be taking a tour, and I'll be sharing some cleanup, some basic things that we can do in the fall.
Yes, as well. That is what we're going to be doing. All right. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.